WrestleMania 34. I think a good takeaway from this is bigger is not always better, because as you're about to see, that there's a lot that can go wrong if things get too overlarge. So the first one is the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. They've been doing this for, I want to say, 5 years now?
It's 4 or 5.
4 or 5 years now. And as a sort of accolade, it's supposed to show the company has faith in a certain wrestler, and that maybe the wrestler will get to do something cool. The problem is that it's brought in on top of other things. Like in the past, if the company had faith in you, you might get a lesser title, like a tag team run, or an intercontinental run, or maybe even the US title, you know, since that's been brought in now. Since then, they've branched out to a Money in the Bank contract, which guarantees you a title shot, and there's my dog, which guarantees you a title shot at any time of your choosing. And now they have this, which doesn't really do anything except say that you've won something. And here's why I bring that up. The former winners, and I'll list them in chronological order as they won: Cesaro, Big Show, Baron Corbin, and Mojo Rawley. All right? All past winners, not counting this year. 2 of those, Mojo Rawley and Baron Corbin, were in this Memorial Battle Royal. Big Show is semi-retired, but I think the most insulting is Cesaro, who won it the first year and has had a pretty middling career since then. And we'll get to it later in the show, but he came into the show as a part of the Tag Team Champions, which, hooray, but we'll get there. So to start out, in both, actually, there were just far too many people. I think I remember, but you and I both were like, who's that?
Yeah.
No, wait, who's that?
Yeah.
Anyway, too many people. And what ends up happening is just this giant scrum where everybody is basically just throwing punches. What you'll get to hear me say a lot in this video is WWE is keen on making moments happen. What they do in this particular type of match, in both the Andre the Giant Battle Royal and the Women's Battle Royal, they separate, like the crowd kind of parts to where there's a section in the center where 2 to 3, maybe 4 wrestlers can do something.
They'll have a spot, and they'll do, you know, a few moves or something to sort of put them in the spotlight for as much as you can be in this type of match.
The thing that I think that I find the most crazy about it is, like, they do these things where they give certain wrestlers, you know, time at WrestleMania, and because they want to showcase those people. But they have such an excess amount of talent right now between Raw and SmackDown and NXT. They have so many wrestlers that they just don't have enough story for all the characters that they have.
Like we saw in the Women's Royal Rumble, there was a moment where a few people got eliminated and the rest got knocked down, and then the only women left standing were all from NXT, and they gave this like NXT chant. It was actually a really cool spot.
Yes.
But again, those women are probably going to get called up and then just lost in the shuffle, like almost everyone else in NXT has done.
Yeah, exactly. Something I want to point out too, at the beginning of the Women's Memorial Battle Royal, just the Women's Battle Royal,
yeah,
there was a moment where Carmella, she is the current Women's Money in the Bank holder. She's showing off her Women's Money in the Bank contract, and all the women in the ring with her just toss her out, and she's done. Cam and I both thought that the reason why they would do that is because she was going to cash in that night against either the winner of Charlotte Asuka or Nia Jax Alexa Bliss, because...
spoiler alert, she doesn't.
Yeah. And so, I guess my question is, then why do that? If you've given her the Money in the Bank contract, and you've given her that opportunity to cash in whenever she wants, there's got to be a payoff. And so we thought the payoff would be that she'd run in and she'd get the belt off of one of the other, you know, one of the other 2 champions. So what they basically did was just, they set up something that made everybody think, oh, this is going to happen, and it's going to be cool, I wonder who it's going to be, and then nothing.
No payoff.
No payoff.
I know you said at the beginning that bigger isn't always better is the good tag for this WrestleMania. But I think why did they do that is probably an even better one. Because I have that question a lot.
Yeah. The third, or I guess technically the other match that happens on the pre-show was for the Cruiserweight title on 205 Live. It was Cedric Alexander versus Mustafa Ali. Now I want to point out from the very beginning, to me, this was the match of the night. Mm-hmm. And we're going to touch on inclusivity a lot from here on out. Something to note about the women's Battle Royal was that it's the first one of its kind. A person of color won it. And there was the first ever Indian wrestler, Kavita Devi, mm-hmm. I think is her name, in it as well. And she's the first ever Indian female professional wrestler in America. So kind of a big deal. This is Cedric Alexander, a person of color, versus Mustafa Ali, who is a Muslim babyface.
The first Pakistani wrestler in WrestleMania, or in WWE as well.
Yeah, so a lot of firsts here. Cedric Alexander and Mustafa Ali, a person of color, and the first ever Pakistani Muslim babyface, which in WWE's history, every time there's a foreign wrestler, he ends up being a heel, because that's what the crowd can relate to. And especially in these times, it's, I think, good and forward-moving of WWE to put this person in, even though it's on the WrestleMania kickoff show, in a high-profile match. And both of them are super good at their job.
I read a interview with Mustafa Ali recently, and he was talking about the tendency for, especially Middle Eastern characters, to play terrorist or, you know, weird. Yeah. And he was saying, like, when he first started out wrestling, he didn't want to do that, but he just wasn't getting bookings, and so he fell back into that because he knew that that would get him work, and it was, and he was playing into it, and he's getting a lot of bookings and traveling around, but at one show, he came out as this, you know, foreign heel and everything, and there was a little kid in the audience who was just screaming at him and terrified of him, and he was like, I am teaching this kid to hate people like me, and he's like, I can't do this anymore. So he stopped doing that, and I mean, it's worked out for him now. He's in WWE. He's, I mean, 205 Live isn't treated as well as it should be, but he's doing real well, and I think it's fucking phenomenal.
So now we move into WrestleMania proper. The top of the show, we've got, for the Intercontinental Championship, Seth Rollins versus Finn Balor versus The Miz in a triple threat match. Again, we're going to touch on inclusivity a lot. Inclusivity? I think that's right.
Yeah, it's inclusive.
Inclusivity, inclusiveness. So,
yeah.
You know what I'm saying. So
everybody's welcome.
Yes. So what they've been doing with Finn Balor lately is that he has been hashtagging a lot of his tweets lately. Finn Balor is for everyone. And he's been promoting a lot of LGBTQ things on his Twitter and his Instagram. So for WrestleMania, he came out and he had on, you know, some of his gear was rainbow striped, and flanking him on either side were members of the Balor Club, also in the rainbow shirts.
Real quick, I want to touch on in the women's Battle Royale, you had Sonya Deville, who was the first openly lesbian performer, yes. And her gear was also had
the pride stuff. Yes. You're right. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me about that. But they made a special point for Finn to come out, and he was flanked on either side by members of the LGBTQ community, which, again, is a huge deal in wrestling. But I have mixed feelings about it, because Finn, I'm pretty sure is dating a woman, which is fine.
Kathy Kelly.
Kathy Kelly.
There's been rumors for a long time that he's either gay or bi, and he might be. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and he might be. It doesn't matter. But the point is that it feels a little shoehorned, because they had an openly gay wrestler by the name of Darren Young, and I'll talk about him more in a minute, who I think could have been a better spokesperson, in the sense that, you know, he came out in WWE before WWE tried to be so inclusive, mm-hmm. and that could not have been easy. And now they've kind of given Finn almost like it's part of his character work now, that he is, you know, a representative of the queer community, which is great. I mean, I love Finn, and if he's queer, then that's fine. I'm great, bully for him. But if they're doing it in the sense that it's a gimmick, or to pander, it seems a little icky.
I don't think that they gave it to him. I think he came up with the idea, which to me makes it better. If it was Stephanie McMahon's version of charity branding, like with the Rory Award and stuff, then that's, I mean, they are helping people and that's fine, but it is also kind of backhanded and underhanded. But I think Finn, because I follow Finn on Instagram, and even before this gimmick, he's always been very inclusive about everything.
Absolutely.
And I think
he seems like a really great guy.
He is, yeah, and I think this was his idea that he took to them and they let him run with it. So I think that makes it a little better, if that's the case.
Well, yeah, and if that's the case, great. But I certainly don't want to come around to where it's, we suddenly have to talk about how Stephanie McMahon did a lot for, queer inclusion in WWE.
Some say Stephanie McMahon started the queer revolution.
That's what I was going for.
Right.
Nicely done.
Yeah, I think Finn doing it on his own is a lot better than WWE trying to push it on him, but I don't think they would.
Yeah. So to
mention Darren Young too, I think it's important to mention Chris Kanyon, who was a wrestler in WCW, came over to WWE, and he came out during his tenure too.
Oh, he did? I didn't actually know that.
Actually, I might be wrong on that. He might have come out after, but I think it was sort of an open secret in the locker room. Mm-hmm. And he said he was bullied a lot for it, and he was treated poorly for it, because that was at the time, that's how just WWE was. They were all a bunch of assholes, and then he ended up killing himself.
Yeah.
And it's a really sad story, so I think it's important when we talk about gay people in wrestling, he's somebody we need to remember.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So the next match is Charlotte Asuka for the SmackDown Women's title.
Shaska.
Isn't that a soda?
Shasta.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
And this, to me, was the second best match of the night.
Speaking of interest, though, can we talk about the graphics? Throughout the show, and I've noticed they've been doing this more on Raw. I don't know if they're trying to be like, we're Raw, but we're also Snapchat, because they've got all these, like, emojis that show up, and, like, for Asuka, they had her mask, which looked cool, but the graphics were just real blotchy and choppy, and it just...
You had actually said something that I thought was really perfect. You said that these were PS2 level
graphics. They were very much...
I could not stop laughing. But you're right. Throughout the pay-per-view, they kept doing these 3D projections.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they're doing it. I guess maybe to...
Saves on pyro.
Saves on pyro. Yeah. Again, why did they do this? But yeah, for Asuka's entrance, they did that. And it just looked terrible. I mean, she's got a great entrance on her own.
Right.
But yeah, they projected a whole bunch of her masks and it just looked really cheap.
Yeah.
I think both of them put in a lot of good work. I think that they told a good story in the ring. Mm-hmm. I did have a problem, and you pointed it out really well, that almost immediately after being put in the figure 8, which is Charlotte's finisher move, it's a figure 4 where she bridges herself into... You know what? Just Google Charlotte Flair figure 8 and see for yourself. But she almost immediately taps out.
That was my big problem with the match. I can understand if Charlotte had worked her leg the whole match.
Yes.
Then yes, that would have made sense. That would have been great. Like I could understand Asuka tapping that. But no, they just did their regular movesets. Had a good match, but then she put her in the figure 8. No work in the legs, nothing, and then Asuka immediately tapped. It was literally like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And they even made a big show of Charlotte got an injury to her elbow and she's bleeding a little bit, and she made a big show of having to prop herself up on one arm. But that, like, it just still, it didn't make any sense. There was no... See, you said they told a good story, but I didn't feel like they did. I didn't feel like there was any story there.
I felt like they told a good story till the very end, because Asuka had worked Charlotte's arm and made it to where it would be harder for her to bridge into the figure 8, but then she powered through it, she supported herself, she was shaky.
All right,
But yeah, she immediately tapped out.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was telling half a story and then giving us the ending.
Again, why did they do this? I don't feel like that benefits either performer. Because Charlotte is already over. She didn't need the push. And now you just have Asuka, who had this amazing streak and had this fire behind her, just, it's over.
Well, and that's actually the other thing I wanted to touch on. Because I agreed with you up until I sat and really thought about it. Asuka needed to have her streak come to an end.
I absolutely agree with that. except for Undertaker, so he should have retired his streak. But I just don't feel like that was the way to go about it. It should have been somebody coming up from NXT that we have seen not only fight Asuka before, but give her a run for her money, like Nikki Cross.
Or Ember Moon.
Or even just somebody who's hot fire right now, like Kairi Sane. Right. Somebody who's coming up who's going to need that push, defeating Asuka to propel them onto the main roster. That's what we should have done, not somebody who's already over and already a fucking 6-time champion or whatever she is.
Right.
Like, it was the wrong time, it was the wrong person.
Well, and, we'll agree to disagree. I think Charlotte was an okay choice. Probably not the best, but so I would rather them break the streak and have a moment where Asuka is humbled and maybe she comes back, stronger and she starts tearing through the women's division and there's real stakes involved now.
I would have even been fine, and that's a good idea, and I would have even been fine if they built up to that with her losing to Charlotte at Mania, but not tapping, passing out from the pain. The ref does the arm race thing. That keeps her strong, and she can even argue then that she didn't actually tap, so the streak's not broken. She can fight to get it back. That would be a good way to go from there. But no, she just
Now, throughout this whole pay-per-view up until this point, they keep showing John Cena in the crowd. And we'll get to Cena Taker in a bit, but
ruining the momentum of every match because they cut to him and he doesn't give a shit about what's happening in front of him. He has the same dumb look on his face every time, like he's bored to death. And it's like, if you're going to be in the crowd pretending to be an audience member, at least react to the matches.
Right. So a referee comes, while Charlotte and Asuka are still in the ring, whispers something in his ear. He is like a dog that heard the word treat. He hops up, he hops over the barricade, not across the ring, but around the ring, and Charlotte's just watching him run, and he runs up the ramp like he's got he's like he's on fire. Kind of stepping on, again, Asuka's moment. At the Royal Rumble, when she won the match, she was in the ring with Alexa Bliss and Charlotte, and it wasn't sure, nobody was sure which of the two female champions at the time Asuka was going to face.
If we didn't say this, if you don't know, if you win the Royal Rumble, you get a shot at the championship.
Yes. So in that moment, they decide to debut Ronda Rousey, who comes down to the ring and points at the Wrestlemania sign and has literally nothing to do with anything going on at the ring in the moment.
Completely steps on Asuka's moment. And it's even worse now, because, like, if they did that and then it was like she immediately challenges whoever Asuka doesn't pick, fine. But they didn't even do that. She has a match with goddamn Triple H and Stephanie.
Right.
There was no reason for that. They just stepped on Asuka's moment to say, here's somebody who is famous for not wrestling. Pay attention to them.
So, again, you've got John Cena, basically what is more important than whatever Asuka's doing in the ring, which I think is largely insulting.
Absolutely bullshit.
Yeah. So, now we're rolling into the next match, which is The Authority, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, versus Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle. Now, speaking to inclusiveness, again, Ronda Rousey has a very troubled past, would that be right? Sketchy past?
She an asshole.
Okay, fair enough. And she's a Sandy Hook truther, so... Ugh.
Oh, is she really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck her.
Yeah, no. Ronda Rousey has a lot of things.
I thought I hated her already. No.
Yeah. Ronda Rousey has a lot of things going against her for me and obviously for Cam going into this. But when they hired her and made a big deal about hiring her, they released several high, and I won't say high profile, but talented WWE superstars, one of whom was Emma, who was a very talented female wrestler. And they kind of explained that in the sense that she had been tweeting negatively about the company and things like that. Or they didn't explain it, but I mean, everybody kind of assumed that was why. But they also released Darren Young. And again, I mentioned him earlier as an openly out gay wrestler. Mm-hmm. And it happened around the same time that they hired Ronda Rousey. Now, could it be just a simple coincidence that they let go a bunch of talent around the same time that she signed what was probably a very lucrative contract for her? Maybe. But it also seems like maybe a cost-saving measure that they let go of a lot of talent, one of whom was an actual gay wrestler, to hire Ronda Rousey, who thinks that trans people are, what was it she said? She said trans people couldn't be in MMA because...
She doesn't want to fight a man who thinks he's a woman or something like that.
It's very backwards thinking.
Yeah.
And
I think Emma and Darren Young might have just been a consequence of them not being over and not having anything for them. But they released a lot of NXT talent too.
And they have a whole ring full of talent having nothing going for them. Exactly. The Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal.
Yeah.
You know, so it's hard for me to stomach that Ronda Rousey gets to come in with her, you know, controversial opinions about trans people, and they let go of an openly gay wrestler.
They fired Kimberly and Sage Beckett, but they kept the Ascension.
So moving on, we get to the SmackDown Tag Team Championship match. The New Day versus the Usos versus the Bludgeon Brothers.
Fun little piece of trivia. The cool skull mask that Luke Harper was wearing was made by Tom Savini, who is a world-famous makeup effects artist.
Wow.
Yeah. I follow him on Instagram and he was posting. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We were both really into that.
Yeah, it was cool as shit. Yeah.
Now, the New Day always has a big entrance at WrestleManias, or they have been in the past few years. This time, Xavier Woods comes out with his trombone. He plays the Dragon Zord flute song, which is awesome, especially for nerds like me who love the Green Ranger and think he's the #1 Ranger. But then it summons an army of little people dressed as pancakes or short stacks. So now let's rewind a bit to when Finn came out with the entire, you know, LGBTQ community. And now we're exploiting little people as short stacks. So that's my point. It seems a little pandering to then later in the show come out and be like, hey, look, isn't this funny that we have little people throwing pancakes into the crowd dressed as pancakes? Come on. So now we're moving on to Alexa Bliss and Nia Jax for the Raw Women's Championship. Now, something I want to point out that I had pointed out to me, and I think this is important as far as what we've been talking about for inclusiveness and forward progress. Spoiler alert, Nia Jax whips the piss out of Alexa Bliss and becomes the new Raw Women's Champ. Thank you. Which is kind of a big deal because Nia Jax is probably the first heavy-set champion who isn't a jerk, or heavy-set female wrestler who isn't also a heel.
She's the most atypical of, like, the female wrestling roster.
Right. Every time you have a heavy-set female in wrestling, they're almost always cast as a heel or a monster. And in a way, Nia Jax kind of is, because Alexa Bliss is 5 foot tall, maybe 110 pounds, and Nia Jax is, I would say, in the 200s.
Yeah, but she's not booked.
She's not booked as like this, like hideous beast.
Right.
And I really appreciate that WWE has decided to put the title on her because I think it's well-deserved, and I think she'll do well with it.
And that's great, but the build-up to it really bothered me. Because the whole build-up to this is that Nia and Alexa were best friends. And then Nia started, or not Nia, but Alexa started hanging out with Mickie James, and then you find out, due to a secret backstage recording, fucking Deus Ex Machina, that Alexa was just using Nia, and she starts kind of fat-shaming her, which really didn't sit well with me. One, because that's just dumb, and two, because Alexa has spoken a lot, candidly, about her own eating disorders. And it just seems weird to me to have that's openly something she talks about, to her go, lol, you're fat.
Yeah.
It was just really, it was just bad. It was bad writing, it was bad booking. I'm so glad Nia won the championship, she deserves it. It does open the door for, you know, probably, hopefully, a compelling storyline between the two, but I just didn't like the build-up.
Plus, a real problem with women's wrestling is you'll have a lot of storylines that involve mean girling. Cattiness. And that's what all this was. And honestly, completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
So the build-up was garbage. I'm happy with the results.
It's just there's so many times during Nia and Alexa's friendship together that Nia had to save her and all this stuff. Yes. You could have so easily built on, you know, like Alexa getting upset that Nia thinks she can't defend herself, or Nia getting upset that she has to constantly save Alexa. There's so many ways you could have gone with it, but no, nah, she's fat.
Yeah. I'm using her to protect myself. And it was just too bad. Yeah. Moving on. AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura for the SmackDown Championship. Moving on, we've got the Raw Tag Team Championship match. The Bar, Cesaro and Sheamus versus Braun Strowman and a to-yet-to-be-determined partner. Okay. Braun Strowman has been on a great ride as of late. He has been this great, believable monster of a heel, super strong, just everything you really want. And he's been doing great work with Alexa Bliss in the Mixed Match Challenge, showing a bit of a softer side to the monster. And it's just been a really great ride.
The best thing that's happened to Braun is that they let him be funny.
Yes.
Because he was already this huge monster that could defeat anybody, and then they let him have a personality, and he's the most watchable dude on the roster.
100% agreed. Yeah. Now, I don't even remember how this match came about, but he's going to be wrestling for the Tag Team Championships by himself. He had never said who his partner was.
There was a secret partner, and they hadn't announced. They were going to announce it at Wrestlemania.
Right. So the Bar is Cesaro and Sheamus. Now Cesaro is again one of those top tier talents. As I mentioned earlier, one of the first actual winner of the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal.
I know it's hard to see what Cesaro brings on the main roster because they haven't let him show off. But if you're curious, go back to NXT and watch his 2 out of 3 Falls match with Sami Zayn.
Yes.
And you will see exactly why he should be world champ.
Yes, and I will co-sign that. Cesaro should be much higher on the roster than he currently is. Not to take anything away from Sheamus.
No, Sheamus is great too.
Absolutely.
Sheamus, much like Luke Harper, is one of those dudes who can perform to a T. Big hoss dude who has personality. Mm-hmm. He's been champ and he's had his run and it was great. And I like where he's at now with like a tag team where they can just kind of have fun and be goofy.
And they had a really organically built tag team story. They came together as adversaries and ended up realizing they worked really well as partners. So it's been a lot of fun to see them wrestle. Until WrestleMania 34. Braun
WrestleMania. Why'd they do that?
Why'd they do that? So Braun gets in the ring and he says his partner isn't some guy in the back. It's someone out there in the crowd, and he points all around the arena.
Now I just want... If you're not familiar with Japanese wrestling, you can look these guys up. But there was Tanahashi, Kota Ibushi, Minoru Suzuki, these amazing Japanese wrestlers all in the audience. So when he said that, a little bit of me was like, oh my god, what? And then
he goes out in the crowd, and he picks a 10-year-old.
10-year-old boy.
Literal 10-year-old boy by the name of Nicholas.
Nicholas, little 10-year-old boy.
Now, Cam and I will both attest to the fact that when this happened, we were like, oh man, that's awesome! And then the reality of it sunk in.
Once I realized I wasn't having a stroke and that I was actually seeing that, I was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen, which automatically you think like, oh, this is cool because it's weird and out there and crazy, and then you think about it and you're like, this is dumb.
So, again, in the vein of moments versus story, they've created a great manufacturing moment. Picking this kid out of the crowd and making him Braun's tag team partner.
Manufactured especially because I think it came out like afterwards or whatever that the kid is actually one of the referee's sons.
I mean, it had to be.
Yeah, they're not going to choose it. I know, and we talked about it at the time, like, you got to sign waivers, you got to do all... So we knew it was but having it be like a company man...
Yeah. So you've got Braun Strowman, who's more than capable at this point, story-wise, of taking on the Bar by himself, tagged with a 10-year-old boy who honestly just looked terrified the whole time.
Absolutely terrible. Now, I mean, that kid, like, he's got to be around, like, wrestlers and stuff, because his dad's a referee, so if he was just hamming it up and playing terrified, that kid's got a bright future, because he was playing it off great.
Yeah. So... as you might have guessed from all the talking we've been doing about it, Braun goes on to win the tag team championships with Nicholas.
It was really funny though when he tagged. At one point, he did actually tag Nicholas in. And Cesaro's in the ring and he gets in. And Cesaro looks like he's about to uppercut his head off.
Yeah, Cesaro looked like he was going to murder that kid.
It was awesome.
If you know anything about Cesaro, not only does he clearly hate children, but he also hates beach balls.
Yes.
So I'm not at all convinced that he wouldn't have actually thrown an uppercut at this kid.
Yes.
But the kid tags Braun back in, and the match goes on, and Braun ends up winning the tag team championship with a 10-year-old. And now we can honestly say a 10-year-old boy has more championship wins than Sami Zayn.
Oh, god damn it.
Yeah, let that sink in. So, that's WrestleMania. WrestleMania, bigger isn't always better, or why did you do this? Yeah. You heard me talk about moments a lot. You heard me talk about manufactured moments. And I think that that's the biggest takeaway I got from this, is that this WrestleMania, for the first time in the longest time, and I've been watching wrestling a lot of my life, was the first time I walked away from a big pay-per-view, you know, like Royal Rumble, like WrestleMania, like SummerSlam, and I felt like I had been sold something I didn't want. And I think that that is the problem with current WWE product.
It's weird to say that wrestling feels fake, because, I mean, ostensibly, not even ostensibly, it just is. It's predetermined.
It's predetermined, yeah.
But at least it used to feel organic. It used to feel like these were real people doing real things. Mm-hmm. Now, like you said, with the manufactured moments, you just know you're building to one big spot and then nothing to follow it up. It just feels disingenuous and fake.
Yeah. And so that's my thoughts, our thoughts, on WrestleMania 34. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you disagree or what you think we got wrong. And, you know, hopefully you enjoyed this.
Go watch TakeOver New Orleans instead.
Solid recommendation.